Yantu mamangani vak pranaschakshu shrotamatra balamindriyani cha sarvani sarvam brahma upanishad mahabrahma nirakuram mama brahma nirakaroda nirakadanamasva nirakadaname astu taratmani nirati ya upanishatsu dharmaste mai shantu te mai shantu om shantihi shantihi shantihi. May our bodies expand and experience great health. May our life force flow unimpeded. May our minds gain capacity in their ability to know Brahman. For the Upanishads state that all existence is Brahman. Therefore, may we never deny Brahman, and may Brahman never deny us. May there be no rejection of Brahman ever by us. We who are dedicated to the realization of the Atman within. And may all the divine qualities cited in the Upanishads also abide within us. For there shines Brahman. May that Brahman protect us, sustain us, and illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat. And so with that sloka, which is the beginning sloka before our Upanishad understudy, and also one that speaks of the Upanishads twice in its flow of several lines, we start this class, which is the final class on the Niralamba Upanishad, that which is without foundations, without supports, needs no underpinnings or any support for its existence. An interesting thought, and so I probably words that have something to do with emptiness or voidness or not fully understood by people who are oriented only to matter. And even in space, which is part of it is very vacuous and unattended by objects, still you find objects there. So you can't find something that's truly formless, except in India, when you talk about words like Niralamba or Nirbija or Nirvikalpa or Buddha's nirvana, all of those have to do with the removal or maybe the actual lack of existence that is continual existence of divine reality. And of course, the West, and I've said it many times, in westernized religion that we've grown up in, there's not only anything that we can see that is truly formless, nor is there anyone telling us about a being that's formless, because everyone's so attached to the form that then that means God has to have a form too. Well, God has beautiful forms by the billions, really, if particularly when beings get realized. That's what I just chanted. May Brahman, we never deny Brahman, and we who are dedicated to the realization of the Atman. That's that thread that weaves everything together inside of 5 elements, 5 senses, body, mind, mechanism, ego, mind, intellect, and so forth. Some continuity that's unseen. And talking about even today about when we woke up and greeted the day, about the wind being unseen. So Vayu, god of wind, is one of those provers of divine reality, that it moves, but nobody can see it moving itself. So the effect of the cause is there. And so beings use that, illumined beings, which we'll talk about later more at the end of this class, the final class on this Upanishad, beings use that as a metaphor for divine reality. It moves and it doesn't move. It's beyond movement. It's motionless, but yet it causes everything else to move. It's the unmoved mover. And we also have other beautiful titles for that divine reality, which is formless, like the unseen seer, which speaks more about consciousness and how it sees everything through all eyes and hears through all ears and so forth, as Krishna says in the Gita, but yet itself is not seen or heard, like the unstruck sound. Its word, that is the word of Brahman, Om, Aum, as we heard one Swami pronounce it recently, is also unheard by most all beings. Only the yogis occasionally hear that appearing in the right side of the subtle body mind, and by echoing by its primal vibration out upon everything, so that one can see that everything is really formed of vibration, all the way down to the element earth and back into the word itself. All of those things are evinced, and that's the first word I uttered today, as you might have noticed or not, was Om. Om Apayantu Mamangani Vak Anuschakshu Shrotra Balamendri Ya Sarvani, all Sarva. All these things receive the light of God and the sound of Om. That is our body, our senses, our mind, our thoughts. And that's the great ideal of the Indian Rishi, or maybe you could call it the penultimate ideal, which of course would be God with form too. But the ultimate ideal in India would be that formless reality. And that's something that is very well spoken of in an Upanishad, like the one we're studying, Niralamba. Alambana is a word Father of Yoga chose for various things, like earth, air, fire, water, ether. It means station. So why didn't he call it tattvas like Lord Copula did? Because we see that they're pretty much the same thing, only the list gets expanded depending on who treats it. Tattvas, principles that are not sentient, but which are projected by the mind, consciously by the mind that's under the auspice of the Atman, not so consciously by the mind that's not under the auspice of the Atman. That's the rub there. As Sri Krishna said, God manifests more in some beings than in others, to put it very succinctly. So in that way, then, he used the word, that is the father of yoga, used the word alambana, as he was taking Lord Copula's old system of 24 tattvas and saying, now it's time for us to really meditate upon those. So alambana means taking something and using it as a foundation to do your ruminations on, your manana, to ponder it, to think on it, to savor it as you do, hopefully. And in that way, then come to an understanding of an underlying reality that is formless, that supports everything else, like ether supports planets. Can't depend on the eyes for that, can you? And beyond the eyes are the ears. That's why the first inkling of something very subtle comes to most beings by hearing the sound of Om. And the visionaries may differ. They'll have a vision, say in dream, for instance, and or in deepest meditation. But usually there's that as Sri Krishna called it, oh, what is that? What is that? The man first hears the sound of Om. Probably in studying the scriptures start taking his mind deeper and deeper. Things that are clouding his ears and eyes start to fall away as he concentrates more and more on those divine words and their meaning. And all of a sudden he takes his eyes off the book and hears something. Let's see, humming. The yogis can hear it just by speaking about it, right? Right. Yeah. have to be kind of careful of that, or it'll take your mind away from what you're doing. So I'm not going to speak that much more about it right now. Instead, I'll speak about the scriptures that we're talking about that bring forth the deeper, profound meaning of the Upanishads. Interesting word. Vedanta is interesting. Vedanta means end of the Vedas, as you know. If you look at the end of the Vedas, which is the fourth section called Anta, it's Vedanta, it means the Upanishads. Upanishad, it's been said or offered, that surmise that basically Upa is like the Upaguru, your teacher. If you come to a teacher, then that knot that you have in your thinking gets sat, destroyed, and the truth, sat, comes forward. So that's been one nice definition of the word Upanishad, why they maybe chose it for the revealed scriptures of India. Now 108, and we're studying one here out of the Vedas. So you could see here, basically, we've had 40 questions, and about 29 of them were answered as of the end of class last week. We took a hunk of them called what is deed and what is non-deed, remember? And that was very interesting, that if you went toward the word deed, then you see that most people are doing deeds unconsciously, as I was just saying. They're not conscious of their Atman, number one. They're not conscious of God being the doer, number two. You want to put it very simply. And in all of that last week, of course, the non-deed would be the ability to refrain from doing karma-based actions and not receive their result. How do they do that, these great seers? We're going to find out, because toward the end, the question is, who is the sage and who is the disciple? So that's coming up at the end. But right now, as far as what is knowledge, what is ignorance, I proposed my own various powerful answers from the scriptures last week, but I didn't read the Rishi's answer. So what does he say about it? Let's start there. I do deeds that are done through the sense organs. The deed thus done is centered in the self alone is the real deed. So what's the non-deed then? Is those deeds that are done through the self or through the sense organs, without the knowledge of being centered in the self. In other words, he goes on, the deed done with conceit as agent, enjoyer, which causes birth, etc., means birth, death, which binds, is that deed which he ascribes here to the senses alone. See, they're just doing, the senses tell them to do things, as it were. They're not connected to the carriage of enlightened mind, which is connected to the reins of prana, which is connected to the charioteer Arjuna, which is the Atman, which is connected to Krishna, Ishvara, which is connected all in Brahman. See, those connections are all, oops, gone missing. You see. So it's only as far as the elements to the senses. It's what yoga has been, excuse the term, bragging on for so long, when it saw people who were attached to matter only and couldn't figure out why they would want to do that, and couldn't figure out also that that was bringing them pleasure and pain. What is pleasure and pain? He answers that too. He says 27 and 28. Bondage is the plan to devote oneself exclusively to the senses and to nature. It springs exclusively from the imagination. That's sankalpa, is the word used here. But liberation is the attenuation of those through discrimination, seeing the difference between the eternal and the ephemeral. And getting rid of the sense of ownership in regards to objects that generate fleeting pleasures and pains in transmigratory life. So that's what the only answer he gives here what is pleasure, what is pain. That's what brings all of that about. And then we looked at what is knowledge, what is ignorance. If you remember the charts I showed you about that last week, his answer to that is knowledge is the immediate realization due to the disciplining of body and sense organs, service rendered to the teacher, hearing, thinking, and meditating, that there is nothing but Atman, the essence of both subjects and objects, which is immutable among all things mutable, like pots and clothes, the same in all, and their innermost essence. So, of course, pots are in clay, so clay would be the essential thing, and pots would be the what came out of them, existing of the same material. So knowledge then is the immediate realization due to disciplining your body and senses and serving your teacher, your guru, and hearing and thinking and meditating about nothing but the Atman. That's knowledge. Ignorance is, he says, the illusory knowledge, like the snake and the rope, of Brahman that is all in all pervasive and non-dual. This illusory knowledge is associated with a plurality of selves, that's egos, based on a plurality of adjuncts of bondage and liberation, stations in life, castes, because he already answered and asked and answered that question, what is caste? Men, women, and immobile things, insentient things, lower animals, mankind, and gods. And all thinking all that to be real then would be the definition of the opposite of knowledge, ignorance. Like the God blog last week, where we're saying knowing many things is ignorance, knowing one thing is wisdom, Sri Krishna said. He's making a distinction between ajnana, jnana, and vijnana, right? Lower knowledge, higher knowledge, or ignorance, higher knowledge, and realization. And he answers pleasure and pain here too. He says, pleasure is the blissful state that succeeds the knowledge of the essence of being, intelligence, and bliss. Dukkha is the mere sankalpa of objects of mundane existence or of the non-self. So real pleasure then he's defining as that which comes after you realize the Atman, and real pain is that which comes before you've realized the Atman. That is being with people, ignorant people, that's hell. Actually, that's pain, but he asks the same question here. What is heaven, what is hell, right? 29. And he mixes this all together, the questions, with his commentaries. So sometimes it's a little bit hard to zoom in on what he's, the answer to the actual question. Yeah, here it is. Association with worldly people who are unholy alone is hell, whereas heaven is association with the holy. So pretty easy definitions there. And then he goes on and answers these questions, which we were taking up last week about bondage and liberation. That's kind of where we left off. So brought you up to speed on where we are. The questions that are coming is, what is to be adored? Who is the disciple? Who is the seer? What is to be sought after? What is to be rejected? Who is the renouncer? The sannyasin. And that's up to 40, actually 41 questions if you count them in the way that they're proposed here. Those are the 40 questions that the Niralamba Upanishad proposes and answers. And we have been answering them too in our own fashion. So if we want to leave off here with bondage and liberation, what is bondage and liberation? Then I want to start out with this chart on India's answer to that. You see here, the title of this is Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti. It's one of the famous statements, and it comes from the Rig Veda. It actually takes a lot of digging to find that, which I did at one point into all the sections of the Rig Veda with a search mechanism after I got the Rig Veda in a file, and found eventually the actual statement. It's accompanied by a testament about the gods, so on both sides of it. So Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vedantya Agnim Yaman Matareshvana Mahu. So they're talking about the cosmic mind, and they're talking about Indra, the god of the gods, and so forth, that all these beings are put side by side with this realization that the Upanishads put forth, that there's basically many paths but one goal. That wasn't seen in other religions. Have you ever heard of it? Any other religions talking about anything but its own ideal, but about its own realization? But in India, you find something like that, then of course raises eyebrows and heads and minds too, and you begin to think about the universality of India, and then the coming of Sri Ramakrishna and his talk about Sanatana Dharma. That quote actually comes soon in another chart. But you can see here, truth is one, saints and sages and seers call it by different names in the sky there under the heading of the Rig Veda. You could also sing that in other Vedas, other Upanishads rather. Yata nadyaha shadamanaha samudre ashtam gachanti namarupa vihaya tata vidvan namarupti vimukti parat param purusham upuiti divyam om. Out of using Sanskrit translates from the Mundaka Upanishad as, there are many mighty rivers flowing into the sea, which when they reach their destination lose all sense of name, form, and identity, merging into the boundless ocean of absolute reality. So may we always never be like mighty rivers flowing into the sea, as we've taken that into English ourselves and memorized that sloka. One of the early slokas in SRV we memorized. Yata nadyaha shandamanaha samudre ashtam gachanti namaru pibhaya. Beautiful Sanskrit rolls off the tongue like that. So that's a way Mundaka Upanishad puts it, echoing the Rig Vedas, a testament of Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vedanti. So I thought you might want to know about that in terms of what is knowledge, what is ignorance, what is bondage, what is liberation. What we're talking about here. And to know that then is a very liberating thing. But not to know it, what can that mean? It can mean absolute forgetfulness of Brahman and never remember it even over a series of lifetimes. Like Sri Ramakrishna saying, most people don't even think of God even by accident. So that's happened to the world now. And then if you move on from there, most people think about God only in their own conventional little narrow way. My watch keeps the only right time, is how Sri Ramakrishna called that. Nobody has a watch on. What's your watch say? 5 to 3. What's your watch say?
4 minutes to 3.
and mine says 3, so we all disagree. I see. The other 2 are non-dualists because they don't have a watch on. So basically, that's what Sri Ramakrishna said about religions, and it gets well instanced here in the bottom of the chart. We'll save some of these nice chants. Well, actually, there it is. I didn't even remember that. Sri Ramakrishna says, everyone thinks that their own watch keeps the right time, but they should check their watch with the sundial. And we took the kids on retreat some years ago on the American River. So the students of SIV, and we actually had them make a sundial. So out of, we got the base brought in, and then we started putting all the things together with all the materials from Earth and everything, made a nice sundial, and then, watched it during the day as the sun went by and told the time by it and so forth. So the whole point was to prove this teaching of Sri Ramakrishna, and how does it apply? What's it matter if we're a few minutes off? It shouldn't matter that much, but in spiritual life, it matters a lot if you're counting these different assessments of time as different religious views. So that's what Sri Ramakrishna is doing when he says that. It gets explained here below. You can see these different paths: Islam, Christianity, Zoroastrianism, Judaism, the lower part of the chart. In the middle, there's Hinduism. On the right, from the bottom up, Shintoism, Jainism, Buddhism. If there had been more paths in that image, I could have put more religions. Basically, that's enough to prove the point here, that all beings think their own watch keeps the right time. So you have people following these religions. If they're following them with a universal mind, and they have a slogan like Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vedanta behind them, or they know that all religions are like rivers flowing into the sea, that all beings are children of God, and this would have to conclude both the virtuous and the non-virtuous also are the children of God. We have that on good merit because Holy Mother said, I'm the mother of the good, I'm the mother of the wicked. So she put herself forward as speaking, as it were, that people fall under a dark cloud sometimes. It's not their true nature. That they all have Atman in them proves that. So that's why we go to that proof or that truth that Atman's in everything. However, it manifests itself more in some than in others, clears up the problem of New Age thinking, where he thinks, oh yeah, that's all Atman. I never taught such clear thought as that, Vivekananda said. But Brahman is in all. Brahman is everything. And so we have to look at it from that better and higher standpoint. So I forget, is that the Matterhorn or one of the mountain image of a mountain I found that people climb? And I had to find one that there's pretty much the standard way up. So I found that. And there you can see outlined in red the trip to the top of the mountain. So we're talking about rivers flowing into the sea. We're using now the metaphor that there are many ways up the mountain, many paths to the goal. But I wanted to put forth a higher Advaitic look, why India has statements like that in their scriptures and other religions don't. They just stay to their own path and their own way of thinking, their own race, their own culture, their own doctrines, their own religion. And quite often that turns conventional on them and is just restricted to heaven seeking called salvation, rather than actually taking you to liberation, becoming one with the Lord. Because even Jesus had said that, I and my Father are one. So there must be something deeper in religion, beyond conventional religion, beyond irreligion, even beyond just religion itself, and beyond Dharma, that we're missing in these paths. So you can see there the route up the mountain it's the Advaitic path, basically. So what's said there is, I should probably just read it from the quote down here. Open-minded beings know that all religious pathways sincerely followed can take the soul to blissful oneness. What is known only to the few, however, is that while there are many paths to get to the goal, there's really only one way. For all paths only lead to the foot of the mountain. From there, the intrepid soul, desiring full enlightenment, must conquer the single pitch to the summit. That dizzying ascent to get to the ultimate goal is called renunciation. So, for instance, what Krishna teaches in the Gita, according to Sri Ramakrishna, Gita, 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 Gita turns into Tagi, and Tagi turns back into Gita. If you say the word over and over again, Gita means renunciation. So there's a lot of opinions about what Sri Krishna's main message in the Gita is, but Sri Ramakrishna sort of came along and put an end to those opinions. India came along and put an end to this idea of exclusivity in terms of religious and that kind of thing. When he said that there are many paths, they all lead to one goal. And so basically, you can see here that all these religions have paths that are going around the foot of the mountain. And you could say that these are all leading people to different levels of understanding of religion, maybe put under the word in our tradition here in the West, that is, the main tradition, Christianity, called salvation. But even at satsang yesterday, we were talking about the Upanishads talking about the fact that they needed to move beyond the heaven-aspiring senses. They worship the gods are in heaven. When the gods became appeased, then everything was in harmony, and it's kind of a wheel. Vedic wheel has one, indigenous people have a wheel, Taoism has a wheel. Everybody, all God's children got a wheel. So, the thing is that wheel, there's not much realization of transcending the wheel until you look at religions from India. The most recent would be Buddhism, the wheel of samsara. There's a way off of the wheel with your ancestors. And it's the ultimate goal of the vijnani, that is the realized soul, to realize that and free himself from all cycles, all transgressions, all transmigrations, all things, all objects, the worlds of name and form, the mind that projects them, even the cosmic mind, to go beyond them all and attain to realization of the true self, the Atman in everything, and merge that Atman then into Brahman. And so in that way, you see these paths sort of wandering around the lowlands. The mountain is right nearby. So that intrepid soul that comes here and finds the truth of, I am my Father are one, call that the Christian version of the sloka for non-duality. Basically, tatvamasi, that thou art, or aham brahmasmi in Sanskrit, much earlier than Jesus, was that this self is Brahman. When that realization begins to dawn on a soul, he's gone beyond ajnana, ignorance, even gone beyond jnana, the wisdom in the six scriptures. Now he's getting into the actual realization of the fact within himself. That's why our minds expand in their ability to know Brahman, right? And that we want that to happen so that we can reach this moksha, this mukti, this asampragyata, this satori, this nirvikalpa, this beatific vision, this formless reality, this pure conscious awareness that's been spoken of in Indian scriptures for so long and so much, and nowhere else, if at all. So that soul comes to the foot of the mountain. And rather than give that a special name, that path, we just call it the way. The way then is renunciation. All the great souls had it. Speaking of Buddha and, before Buddhism was there, speaking of Jesus before Christianity was there. And then, of course, going into Hinduism, it has a long history back to the Vedas of realized souls, which we'll look at here pretty soon. Then they found out ekam sat vipra bahuda vedanta. There are many paths that lead to the goal, but there's only one way to reach it. You're going to have to give up everything. What's one of those things you'll have to give up? The path itself. Somebody yesterday, once you've walked the path, is it any good for you anymore? It's good for others maybe, but for you, you've reached the goal. So now You don't want to have to go back along it many times to try and convince yourself that you've reached the goal. You've reached the goal. You want to abide there and not backslide or lose ground anymore. So that's going to be that total renunciation of everything that the great seer attains in spiritual life. So I put a quote from Sri Ramakrishna, I put a quote about from the Gita, Sri Krishna, I put a quote from the Upanishads, I put a quote from the Mundaka Upanishad. Here's one from Lord Buddha. The highest inward altitude of spiritual experience, the Arhat beholds the Paragatam, the supreme goal, as well as all the many pathways below leading to the mountain. So that's, of course, Buddhism is an Indian darshana, if you want to call it that, at its in its inception. So we have Lord Buddha there, champion of what we call Advaita in Vedanta, speaking of his experience of the highest inward altitude. And that's going to be, for him, beyond nirvana, even into what's called parinirvana or mahanirvana. So this is the highest inward altitude that the soul can attain to. And the pathways leading towards the foot of the mountain are going to have to be utilized and then given up to move up to the pitch itself. Drop everything that you considered to be real before. Should we go back and read some of them there? And the seer here's talking about what is hell, what is suffering, what is what are all these questions that are being asked. What is pleasure and pain coming from the process? And what is the deed and the non-deed? All of these things are leading us towards that final realization that those things are old, tired, you're world weary, they cause world weariness, and they always veil the light of the Atman. They always dim the light that's in you, and that you need to see your way toward the highest goal by utilizing. That light has to be undimmed and shine inward with clarity and intensity towards the realization of something that's beyond salvation, which we call in India liberation. We were talking about it in terms of Kaivalya before that, how to isolate yourself first from nature. Well, nature is where pleasure, pain, demons, bad deeds, bone, flesh, marrow, castes, go right on down the list here in the Upanishad. They all exist in nature, but they don't exist in the Atman. When you realize the Atman, the world goes away, Sri Ramakrishna said. So lose your attachment to the world. Be released right away from the transmigratory process. Who said that? Actually, both Buddha and Shankara. Get yourself released from the transmigratory process right away at the feet of the Guru, Shankara says. So you come to learn from these great souls. We're getting there. Who is the seer? Who's the sage? Who's the devotee? It's what we're going to look at soon here. So this chart rather shows itself up obviously, but it makes that one distinction that's important. There may be many paths to the goal, but there's one way to get to it. And that's when everything drops away, like it did for you last night in deep sleep, and you were one and peaceful, and you had no worries, no concerns, and no imperfections, no thought of them even. You see. But beyond deep sleep, of course, because cause is there, and it brings you back to the effect of dream and waking. When cause gets burnt in deep sleep, then the soul, the door opens up of renunciation to the highest reality, which we call Brahman. All right, let's, to put a capper on this, as if it needs proving, I don't think it really does, but this chart here, stages towards liberation, would explain more about these pathways that people are taking called religions. Some people become very adept at religion. And in India, that's called practicing the Dharma. So practice is always enjoined in India, method and practice. Don't let pseudo-advaitists tell you different. People who think they understand non-duality and say, oh, you never have to struggle. You don't have to do practice. You don't have to read the scriptures. You don't even have to meditate. You're already that. That's a realization for those beings who have already studied, meditated, and realized the goal through those very same means and methods. Then they can say that. So for then all of us who are going through or wanting to go through these stages which take us beyond conventional religion, which is very unsatisfying as is seen in the world, basically, if you always remember God all the time, then you've won that battle and you're headed for liberation. But you can go to church once a week on Sunday and forget God the other 6 days, you see. So that's the difference between remembering God and forgetting God. God has to be the central pole of your whole existence. You have to put God at the foundation of your heart first, and then study, then meditate, then recite the slokas, and then do your japa and your mantra and so forth. And then it will have great effect. So those stages towards liberation here are put nicely, and it always gives me a chance to use Swami Vivekananda's great advice for us here in the West. You must pay special attention to study. Set about collecting everything that books, beginning with the Rig Veda, we started out good today, didn't we? Down to the most insignificant of Puranas and Tantras, have got to say about creation, annihilation of the universe, about race, about heaven and hell, the soul, consciousness, the intellect, etc. Well, shall we go back and read? Because all of these things are mentioned in these 40 questions. Every one of them. So he says you must collect these and pay special attention to study of those kinds of things. Also, sense organs, mukti, liberation, transmigration, and such like things. No child's play will do. I want really scholarly work. I am strongly of the opinion that very few persons in any yuga attain jnanam. That's not wisdom. Wisdom of spirit, spiritual things. And therefore we should go on striving and striving even unto death. Swami Vivekananda, in his letters to some of his brother disciples, when they were coming west to bring, what shall we bring? Bring Panini's grammar so they can understand Sanskrit the way God is expressed in the earliest times, and bring the Upanishads and start making translations in English for them that are cogent. He went on and on about this in preparation for us receiving what we're sitting here receiving today. 150 years later. So, you know me, if I hear something like that, then I want to go and take it further. So I did. I took all these arms of the Divine Mother and all the sayings of the sages, rishis, and the seers, and made a consensus and conclusion about them. So under each one of India's most prominent darshanas, first we have Samkhya. It indicates the distinction between consciousness and matter, that between you and objects, basically. It reveals how consciousness enters and departs bodies and forms. Tattvas, right? Now we know how we get in, now we know how to get out. Getting in is called evolution, getting out is called involution. This isn't rocket science, but it's bits of knowledge that are going to free you. That's why it's called stages towards liberation. You won't hear this when you're talking about salvation, taking up a savior. Well, where's the savior now? 2,000 years later. I want to hear what he said about being free. India will give you that. Buddhism will give you that, and so forth. So anyway, one of the underpinnings is that you'll say, well, where am I and who am I? What am I? And so forth. Well, I can answer you the where, you're on Earth and you came here through the tattvas, and you're going to leave Earth and you're going to go back to your source using the tattvas. It's all answered for you. Whether there's 24, 36, or 99, according to one Upanishad we were studying 2 months ago. Now you know how souls get here and how they get out. And you know also that they're not the things that they're using. You're not the rocks that you step on when you cross a river, right? You're not even the river. You're the self, you're the soul. So those rocks are like places of purchase for soul, the feet of souls, who come down from causal to subtle to waking and go back to subtle to causal, like you do every 24 hours in Jagrat, Swapna, and Sushupti, if you know what I mean. Samkhya also explains the nature of suffering and the impediments in embodied life, called gunas, right? It gives the order of grouping the evolutes along with their involution, sanchara. What does yoga do for you? Provides a comprehensive sadhana designed to purify all aspects of being. And I'm putting one word, Sanskrit, in parens after each of these. This one's called Ashtanga. What's that was provided? 8 limbs by Father of Yoga. It encourages concentration upon created principles as divine expressions. What's the word? Lambana. We just said that. Patanjali took Kapil's sattvas and turned them into alambanas so that we can meditate on them and know the things that we're using to get in and out of manifestation. Free us from all darkness or mystery around that and become clear about ourselves being the ones that project everything and withdraw it. Teaches meditation with the dynamics of perception in accord with levels of awareness. Those are the samadhis. From savichara to nirvichara to sasmita to sananda to sampragata to asampragata. All the samadhis were taught by yoga in stages, just like the tattvas were taught in stages and back. What does Vedanta do for us in our urge or striving for liberation? It accents the truth concerning the divine and perfect nature of the soul of mankind. I am Atman, all abiding. That I am I, there can be none other. And that truth am I, he says. That's liberation. One of my favorite, actually, verses in which to explain that happens in the Hasta Amalaka Stotram, fruit in the palm of your hand. Manuschakshuradir vimukta svayamyo. Manaschakshuradir manaschakshuradihi. Manaschakshuradir agamya chakshuraha. Yadnicha palabdis swarupahamatma. In this 6th sloka of Hasta Amalaka, it's said, and this is about Niralamba, no supports. Even bereft of sense experiences, mental cognition, and vital functions, that internal reality continues to exist, relying upon nothing. It is that which animates the senses, impels the life force, and awakens the mind. That perpetual being am I, self-effulgent, illumining the cosmos. Ekam Sattvipa. I have reached that highest goal of oneness with Brahman, and I find out that I am that. What's happened as a result? Even if my sense experiences go away, and my senses, and my mental cognition stops functioning, and my vital functions go away, and I lose the body, that reality exists nonetheless as the foundation, needing none of those supports for its existence. Right? So I exist whether I have, if I don't have body, if I don't have prana, and if I don't have senses and objects, I still exist. That's putting the coffin nail in anything that has to do with doubting your true nature, the Atman, and realizing that you're ever free and never bound. What does Tantra say about liberation? It transforms all beings, objects, and events by deifying them, turning them into expressions of divinity. So as I'm on the way to objectless reality, it's not going to do me very good to be averse to everything and hate everything. Those things are going to get on to me and hold me back. Like hate my ancestors, for instance. I have to worship them, but I have to go beyond them nonetheless. So everything here, then I need to deify. And so we'll let go its hold. Let go thy hold, sannyasa bold, say Om Tat Sat Om. So all those things, you cause them to let go when you see them as divine and quit seeing them as obstacles and impediments. Tantra also invokes and awakens all deities as conscious personifications through ritualistic worship. And that's where ritualism takes on its most important facet in India, in Tantra. If you put that worship with yoga and Vedanta, you've got ritualistic worship, which is true and authentic. You've got yoga, which gives you the practice. You've got Vedanta, which gives you the realization that I am ever one with Brahman. I am always free and never bound. And that all this that seems otherwise is this ignorance that the Rishi is talking about here. It doesn't really exist. Tantra also utilizes mantra and meditation on God with form to express divine life. It's like mantra yoga it's shared by Vedanta and yoga, but basically it really has its heart in the deities, and the deities have their place in Tantra. In Vedanta, you begin to move beyond the deities, beyond your ancestors and so forth. So in that way, then again, you're deifying everything, and you can have a divine life as you depart life. Turn your whole path to the top of the mountain into one concerted effort to realize God, because thou art that. It finally idealizes the sanctified relationship of masculine and feminine principles. We call that Shiva and Shakti. So don't get confused about gender and all that. Go to the primal two genders. The men are Shakti, the men are Shiva, and the women are Shakti. And realize the nature, your true nature in that. The divine feminine, the divine masculine. And then you have the perfect combination for balance. And you get into a sanctified relationship with consciousness in its two main modes. And that really leads nicely into Kundalini Yoga, which is another one of the great darshanas. It moves to awaken power and manifest it consciously at all levels of your being. It's called Shaktipat. It offers an intense practice to effect purification and opening of channels and centers. That's called Nadi Yoga. So you want these nadis to open up. If you're breathing and eating good food, that's helping with your physical nadis, but don't stop there. The mind also has nadis that conduct higher prana and psychic prana, and Chit Shakti is there, right? So you want her to come flowing through those and just completely clean them out and stretch and widen them. May our minds expand in their ability. Have you ever wondered how the mind can expand? It's those nadis there that need widening. So she's the road crew, you see. So go down there deep and widen up those channels, and all of a sudden you're thinking clearer and more profoundly. And there's more you can contain more in your memory. Retentive memory happens when she widens out the nadis. It's all done at the behest of the Chitti Shakti. Who said that? Back here to yoga. Patanjali said that in the final sutra of the fourth pada of the Yoga Sutras. Don't get started on that. So I can go on for a while on that one. Works to refine the mukhya prana, prana, and psychic prana to bring forth higher vision. Well, I jumped the gun, didn't I? I already explained that. Basically, physical bodies and things out here like moving my hand and my legs and so forth, prana. But man does not live by that prana alone. Food and its energy. There's a psychic prana inside which precedes that. And before that, there's Shakti herself, which is more pure than prana. She's the holder of prana. Prana is like the spider web. She's the spider, the Upanishads say. And she gets about her web. Guess what else? She doesn't get stuck in it. So that's the facility of Shakti. And finally, taken in conjunction with the Upanishads, opens higher centers to afford samadhi, chakra yoga. Basically, am I mixing systems there indiscriminately? Over the last some 4 or 5 years, we've taken at least 8 Upanishads that are mother Upanishads that speak directly of Kundalini. So no, we're not mixing systems. If it is mixed, the ancient rishis did it before us. And so they saw, as Ramakrishna said, in this day and age, there will be no spiritual awakening without the awakening of Kundalini Shakti. Awaken her and let her have her effect, have her sway on everything here. That just leaves one more darshan that we favor quite a bit, Vasishta's yoga. He says, in it is said, preserves some of the earliest teachings on crucial systems like the 5 akashas. That was what he was teaching Sri Ram. So come this weekend to the seminar on Sri Ram's teaching in the Adhyatma Ramayana, which I'm studying very deeply right now. And I have 2 new charts for you to see about what the Avatar says about Advaita. It may be for the few, but it's good for the many. That was one of the subtitles I considered for one of the charts. For the few, this advaitic knowledge that he gives once in a while. Even in the Adhyatma Ramayana, he spares it for just certain beings. Doesn't tell it to everyone. But it's good for everyone to know about this and hear it. It's good for it to be spread through, say, your teacher should know it, so that they always have Advaita in the back of their mind as they're giving you the Vishishta Advaita, not Vashishta, not Lord Vashishta here, but Vishishta. It means the qualified non-dual teachings. So systems like the 5 akashams were stated by Lord Vashishta to Ram in the early days, and now they persist because of that. It also holds particular details on the processes of formation of karmas and samskaras. The actual dynamics of those could have been lost, how they actually happen. Like I was just saying, so could have the idea of there's nadis in your mind could have been lost. In fact, probably this nowadays they have, because they think they're in the body. But the nadis, the psychic prana, doesn't run through the physical nerves. It doesn't need to. It runs through the psychic nerves in the mind, not the brain, the mind. So we make these distinctions so that people can meditate on the alambanas of the mind. And they don't have to be restricted to the gross alambana of the brain, and always think in terms of, I'm a fleshy noodle in a skull, or something. That's where my thoughts happen. They happen at a much deeper, higher level. So do karmas and samskaras, knots called granthis, also happen there in the mind. And they become diseases later in the body if you don't fix them. And meanwhile, people, the medical tradition and so forth, running around trying to create outer causes for knots that are caused by something in the mind that later work their way out in the body. And now they're trying to treat the cause in the body, which the effect in the body, which is actually coming from the samskara in the mind, caused the problem, the lack of flow of prana and psychic prana that caused that disease in the body, that cancer, those blame it all on cholesterol, but just forget all about samskaras, right? If you have a clear samskara, then cholesterol will not be a problem. Vasishtha also presented Vedanta prior to its more mature development via Vedavyas in later millennia. So we think that the word Vedanta and the Vedas probably couldn't have happened very easily as the Upanishads were actually being written down because they hadn't ended yet. So basically, then we think that beings like Vedavyas at a very early age, in that early yuga that Ram was present in, that Ramakrishna was present in as Ram, then we think that basically he was already beginning to solidify and formulate these great teachings that we call Vedanta nowadays, and make so that they could be ready for the Avatar's messenger, Vivekananda, to bring them forth to us in an age like this. Finally, Vasishtha follows the time-tested tradition of utilizing stories to communicate spiritual teachings. And that was followed later on too by Buddha and Christ, and earlier by Krishna. Telling stories and metaphors is a very good way of bringing these teachings more clear. So this is a sort of summation that I did of all these darshanas which I've studied. And you can see the names of them there, and in those hands, those arms that are reaching heavenward. And then a final quote here. The excellent and effective utilization of darshanas and yogas, combined philosophical systems and regimens of practice, serve to both refine religion and prepare spiritual practitioners, qualifying the latter to attain to the ultimate stage of self-realization known as moksha. So is that a good fitting answer to the question, what is bondage? What is freedom? But let's not forget then to take the Rishi's answer to that. Bondage is the conceit of egotistic agency in regards to actions. Bondage is imagination prompted by desire for the 8 occult powers, anima, etc. Bondage is the imagination prompted by the yearning for following the gods and for following men. Bondage is the imagination leading to the practice of yoga with its 8 limbs. Bondage is the planning of action and duties bound up with castes and stations of life. Bondage is to imagine that Atman has qualities like doubts and fears. Bondage is to plan to acquire knowledge in order just to perform sacrifices, vows, austerities, and make gifts. Bondage is to plan to devote oneself exclusively to moksha. Yeah, good luck with that. Bondage is to plan to acquire knowledge. Bondage is what springs exclusively from imagination. So everything that can be imagined is projected by the mind, and that's running people into circles, transmigratory cycles with their ancestors, again and again and again, in the same old mundane run of great study of a life on earth. So when you come here to earth and you find a good path and a good teacher, wake up. This is your chance. And your good merit, your good karma has brought you here. And now you need to take those teachings deeper. What is that? Sri Ramakrishna said, the oyster comes to the top of the ocean once in a while, gets a raindrop, pure water, because it's in salt water, gets a pure drop of water, closes its closes itself and runs down to the bottom again, sinks itself in the sand, and begins to develop an oyster, a pearl, you see. So that grain of sand and that drop of pure water, that's his teaching about coming forth from all of this bondage that's all around you, thinking in various ways. To know many things is ignorance. To know one thing is freedom. That one thing which is worth knowing is Brahman, or your true self, your identity with Brahman. So, talking about everything that's opposite of freedom, liberation, stages of liberation. I just read you all the types of answers. Actually, that one question, what is bondage, elicited more answers from this Rishi than any other question. So he really wants you to know the difference between knowledge and ignorance, between liberation and bondage. And so now our questions have to turn to, as we end this series of classes on the Niralamba, who is the disciple and who's the sage? And what is to be sought after in that relationship and what is to be rejected? And who's that ultimate being called the sannyasa, like Vivekananda, you see, the great sannyasa. A good summation you can look back with on all of this and see with these 6 or 7 darshanas of India, how it proves this ultimate goal, and how it proves also that there's something beyond salvation, beyond religion, that needs to be encountered and accepted. I did have another chart on bondage and liberation, but there won't be time to go into it. I think we've covered the subject enough. But you probably can look it up in Footfalls of the Indian Rishis when you see the 3 types of bondage and the 3 types of liberation there. There's bondage to nature, number 1. There's bondage to sense objects, number 2. And there's bondage to conventional life, mundane living. Then with liberation, there's a liberation of wisdom, there's a liberation of detachment, and the liberation of transcendence. So if you want to look it up in Footfalls, you can see the quotes underneath each of these. But this is basically the threefold bondages and the threefold liberations way back to Samkhya time when Lord Kapila gave it to us. That's how ancient it is. So I'll just mention that chart. But let's go to this question then of who's the sage and who's the disciple. There's a chart I want to show you about that. The integral constitution of the luminary, it's called. We want to look at the, as close as we can, as I said, if we're able to take this magnifying glass of absolute revelation and shine it on a Ramakrishna or a Vivekananda or a Ramana Maharshi or a Jesus or a Buddha, what would we see in the lens close up? That's really the integral constitution of these beings that make them so unique and also so adored and so followed by so many beings. To hear it from the Nirvana Upanishad, since we're studying the Niralamba Upanishad, let's hear it from the Nirvana Upanishad. Those qualified souls who are fit to study the Upanishads are protectors of the field in which I-ness is destroyed. Nice, huh? They protect that field where the ego gets cremated. They protect the boundaries so that people can still go there and offer their egos and say, destroy my non-self, please, will you? To them, all beings in the world are just pure consciousness. So the doctor, the healthy don't need a doctor, as Sri Krishna put that. To them, talking about uprooting of karmas amounts to mere words. For the illusion of I-ness has been cremated and spread about the cemetery of self, of Brahman. For others, these luminaries represent a ship with which to cross the ocean of earthly existence, right out of the Upanishads. And while we're reading that kind of thing, we'll save the Atma Bodhi Upanishad till the end. There you see the image of an illumined soul sitting humbly. And these questions come from Shankara mostly. And so we have questions coming from the Niralamba Upanishad now in a more current age, which is what, maybe 700 AD or so, 1300 years ago instead of millennia ago. We have Shankara coming forth with his description, his question, like, what is their ideal? What is their heart? Who is their preceptor? What's their activity? What does their knowledge consist of? What are their observances? What's their instruction? To whom is their dedication? What's their appearance like? What's their protection? What's their movement look like? What do their clothing look like? What's their deep study about? What's their meaning? What's their sleep, their seat, their bliss, their support? And what's their compassion like? And what's their renunciation? And their apt conclusion about everything. That pretty much takes us through all of these questions about who is the seer, who is the disciple, what is the greatest austerity, because they say, what is their austerity? And what is their supreme abode? And what do they seek after? And what do they reject and what do they accept? And what do they renounce? Let's look. Their ideal is the final beatitude. Well, can do no better than to just go back to Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuta Vedanti, and it'll answer that question, as we already did, and it'll also answer this final conclusion. What's their apt conclusion? Their final question, basically the final beatitude. What's the final beatitude? Beyond earth and heaven. Because everybody's seeking to be reborn here. And then they go to heaven, and then that cycle gets going, and nobody knows who they are from lifetime to lifetime. They forget their lifetimes. So there's something beyond that samsara, beyond that wheel of time called the Kala Chakra. And that's been pointed out by the great seers, most recently by Lord Buddha in a more profound way, and then by Shankara 1,200 years later. And now most recently by SRV. I'm talking about little all us here in our organization. No, by Holy Mother, Sri Ramakrishna and Swami Vivekananda, that SRV. So the final beatitude is their ideal, and what's their heart? A river of immortality. Who's their preceptor? The realized soul. They are always born, like Vivekananda, in the atmosphere and environment of like the Kali temple with Sri Ramakrishna as the priest. And he comes to him, of course, as a teenager, and others follow him, come with him. What's their activity? You'd expect a more profound answer, but it's actually quite good. Free of convention. That's what we started out with today. Religious convention, particularly. Convention can be lots of things, just society, talking, parties, and the conventional habits of people. But if we look at it in terms of religion and philosophy, then religious society and its limitations is what we're talking about here. We're actually attacking it as a granti, as a knot that's happened to people in different countries. Caste and race, he talks about, right, first. Then he talks about bondage and liberation from it. So this is where the Upanishadic rishis are always leaning towards, to get people beyond the limited, mundane, conventional thinking of their time. Because time is an illusion. and the eternal moment awaits them. If they can get out of the river of time, then they're the witness of all of this. Every one of these questions gets one answer then. Atman. I am Atman, all abiding. What's their knowledge? Again, kind of humorous, comprehensive. You want me to tell you all about the Upanishads? Well, I've just spent 5 classes over the last few months trying to do that, but you just want it in a word. It's comprehensive. You've never seen knowledge like that. You've never heard it in your lifetimes. You won't hear of it amongst people. What kind of people? Worldly people. Because where are you when you're with worldly people? In hell. I have to repeat it for a third time. I mean, they take these things literally. This isn't just some joke. They can quip it, say, what's your knowledge like? Comprehensive. That's a great answer. Then dig for it. Dig for the meaning. But this gets a little bit more to the point of practice. What's their observance? What are their observances? Yamas, niyamas, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dhyan, dharana, jhana, samadhi, the 8 limbs of yoga. So I start out, I observe ahimsa, nonviolence. I'm truthful, I'm satyam, I'm so forth and so on. Those are my observances because I may be the realized Atman, but I still have to keep the mirror of the mind wiped clean because I'm here amongst hell-like beings and lokas, and that can rub off on me if I'm not careful. Well, let's get to what is their protection later. So what's their instruction? Only Brahman exists. You wouldn't have a lot of satisfaction by sitting with the Advaita for a long time. Although I can sing you some beautiful verses where he got to talking, somebody got him talking. Basically, it's just silence. You're with them, they're in silence. We found out about Swami Sheshanandaji Maharaj, about, he wouldn't talk anything if it wasn't Brahman. You couldn't engage him in any other conversation. Phone calls with him were rather humorous and a little tense. So I'd like to speak to Swami Sheshananda, please, because you're thinking of coming to spend Durga Puja with him at his ashram or something. And then you wait 2 minutes while Brahmachari goes off down the hall. You can hear the footsteps echoing away. And then this big clopping of his old shoes coming up the hallway to pick up this phone. The first thing he says is, well, why are you calling me? Why are you bothering me out of my Brahmic bliss? Oh, well, this is such and such, and I'm such and such. I'm thinking of coming down to Durga Puja and so forth. Silence. Well, okay, click. So that's how you got permission from him. And I'm not exaggerating at all. It was that sparseness of words was in him, whether you were on the phone with him or in his presence. So it just goes to prove that there are these people who are just no nonsense, and they've gotten to their level of enlightenment by that route. That's their observance. And they're not going to be pulled out of it for menial things, for emotional stuff that you're going through. Forget your small self and remember your Atman, your mother used to say. Their dedication, beautiful, to their disciples. If they have any dedication, then it's going to be to those beings who are suffering, but who are sincere and who are enterprising, who are spiritually intrepid. Spiritually intrepid. They want to go forward towards this, ekam sat, one truth. And that's going to galvanize them and make them serious and sincere. So that's a beautiful example of what their dedication is to. Their appearance is like 12 suns. Their protection, the presiding deity. So they have an ideal they're born with, and it comes with form and beyond form too. Most all the great beings, Even Ramana Maharshi had an ideal in form like Shiva, or great souls will have an ideal in form like Ram. They'll carry that with them everywhere. They won't necessarily tell you who their ideal is because they're silent, number one. And if you can get them talking, it's all about non-duality, right? Freedom. Oh, do you want to get free? Don't talk to me about anything else. Well, who's your Ishtam? Let me ask you that question. I have an Ishtam. I'm settled. But do you have an Ishtam yet? No. Well, they'll sketch you one then. See, you got to get to formless reality through form, through God with form. Don't mistake me. You can't get to the infinite through the finite. But the God with form is not the finite. It's a manifestation of Brahman in form. It's the real article. It's the highest conception of God that the human mind can comprehend, to quote Vivekananda. What's their movement like? Their movement is the unmani state. You might as well go back here and say, well, what's a deed and what's a non-deed? Well, their movement is the non-deed. They don't move through deeds like other people. Oh, I got this done today. Then tomorrow you have some negative thing come back from some good thing you did. And then you're put off track, you see. Or I did something bad today. Next day, nothing bad happens to you. Oh, I got away with it. Either way, you're in a deed. You're in the karmic deed, and you don't know when it's going to come and how it's going to affect you. But unmani state is like no mind. You don't do things with an ordinary mind. You don't do things with the unripe ego. You don't do things with the dull intellect. Uh, you don't do things in the duality of nature. You do them only in the oneness of the Atman, and you don't even do them. That's one of their secrets. You put another one there. What's their secret? Oh, they don't do things, in Maya. They don't do things in nature. Krishna clarifies that in the Gita. What's their clothing? A garland of bliss. That's because they are so dedicated to the disciples that their disciples are always bringing them garlands. Reading today in the final 2 chapters of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna about Kali Puja, Sri Ramakrishna's last Kali Puja, because he was at Kasipur finally, and he was about ready to die, that is, die from the body. And so he had the cancer of the throat, and he was just blissful and dancing and singing and laughing and talking about God to all the devotees. And there's a big long paragraph about how people came to see him on that special day, and they all brought flowers and garlands. He was like bedecked. So it's not hard to prove this statement from Shankara. What's their clothing? Only thing I could see him in was flowers. They loved him so much that they bedecked him. They garlanded him. Their deep study is of the revealed scriptures. That could be guessed. It's not a hard answer to come up with. They love non-duality, and the closest thing to non-duality in word, besides the direct transmission of the Guru, who's realized in Advaita, would be the revealed scriptures. So that means there's a distinction in them between the revealed scriptures and those that are just ordinary. Who is the father of that teaching, who again kept it for us for a long time so that it wouldn't go away? Vishishta, his path to moksha, teaching to Ram in the Yoga Vishishta, starts off talking about the difference between the Shastras, the Viveka Shastras, and the Aviveka Shastras. Those Shastras which discriminate between the real and the unreal, and those which don't. So when you hear something like that, which I did when I was young, I got it. You see, now I know there are revealed scriptures that you stay to. Those are the books you want to read. Like Sri Ramakrishna kept the Ashtavakra Samhita near him. He never read books and so forth, and he didn't like books and all that. Not true. He loved the revealed scriptures, and he loved the Vedanta, and he loved yoga, he loved Tantra and so forth, and could quote from all the scriptures with his perfect memory. Their meaning, the existence of Brahman. That is, if you see a seer, then you can say, oh, I see God exists. He's proof of it. The only problem there would be what? Doubt. That you see the person, you can't believe that God can be in a form. Doctors came to Sri Ramakrishna to treat that illness, and they all were in doubt about him. The devotees were offering him flowers, dancing around him, singing him, going into ecstasy, going into deep meditation, and the doctor sat there looking and just didn't know what to think. But every one of them, right on down to Dr. Sarkar in the end, could not help but admit that this was a divine being that was in front of them. And they said, oh, I can't believe that God comes into a form, and why are they taking the dust of your feet? I don't like that. So they were all Hindus, right? Hindu doctors. They were all very standoffish from the modes in which the devotees, who's the devotee, right? And who's to be adored? These questions, they're all very standoffish from the modes in which the devotees adopted to adore the Lord when they finally saw him in a form. I mean, you've waited centuries, lifetimes, and then God comes into form and you're going to have doubts? How backwards that is? What a wasted opportunity that is? And what does it matter if they're perfect or non-perfect? According to your assessment, are you so perfect that you can judge a soul like that? So anyway, we're just saying that existence of Brahman is proven more and more by that soul and by being in company with that soul. You see, what is to be sought after? Holy company, in other words. As soon as you can find it, as soon as you can have it. Their sleep, that's a good one, is oneness with Shiva. So they're in constant sushupti. I'm sorry, conscious sushupti. Probably constant too, but basically that's oneness with Shiva. Their seat is one seat free of hatha. That is, they're not depending, again, Niralamba. They don't depend on the body or anything the body has to do, or the body's health or ill health, or body's illusion or not. They don't depend on any of that. They have one seat, and that's ekasana. Sounds like Shankar, doesn't it? Because he said, just master one posture, asana, the third limb. Just master one posture and sit still. You see, don't shift about. So this would be his advice. Their bliss is free of the gunas. Imagine not only being free of darkness and restlessness, but being free of balance. Because if you have balance, it's very nice, right? But what's the problem with balance? Fear of losing it. That's why only renunciation is desirable. Only renunciation is desirable. And just everything else. So back to here, right? That's the one renunciation, right? So one road up to the top of the mountain. If you carry anything with you there, you're going to be fear of losing it. Well, I think I'll take this bit of water with me because I'm going to get thirsty. Cast it away. God will rain clouds on you. You can drink water from the sky. You'll forget about thirst when you see God anyway, because the senses will all go away. You won't have a tongue to be thirsty with. See. And their support, the Blessed Lord itself, or himself, or herself. Their compassion is divine sport. That's a nice one. If you want to know the role of compassion in Vedanta, because we know that it's in Buddhism, but in Vedanta it's not really big on compassion. It's bigger on love and realization, liberation. But if you want to find the place for compassion in Vedanta, there it is. The very fact that they will come and sport here, because this goes back to existence of Brahman, right? Who are they? What is their meaning? That Brahman exists. So jump ahead then. And you know that through what? Through their lila, through their defined sport. And then their renunciation, because it's so important, they renounce all results and separations. Back to oneness is their ideal, right? Free, the final beatitude. And that's their conclusion. Sarvosmi, existence is. There's nothing but existence. And when there's doesn't seem to be existence, it just went into hiding, called seed form. And then it'll come back out and dance some more, and they'll sport in it. When they're one with Shiva, that sport is not being shown. But when they're coming back out and everything comes out of seed form and manifests itself, then there they are, proving everything that existence is. And we'll end here then this series of classes by reciting the Atma Bodha Upanishad sloka. Beautiful too. It says, just as to an owl the sun is dark, so also for an ignorant person there's darkness in Brahman. Nice, huh? So an owl looks at the sun, there's just a black spot. See, very great analogy for the ignorant person. They look here and they don't see any Brahman whatsoever. They just see matter. I know we like to see the owl used in nicer, wiser ways, but this is also a very good illustration. But Maya has gone away from me. This is the Rishi himself talking. I am the pure vision. I know myself without a second. I have ascertained the highest truth. A wise man always abandons poison and favors Amrit, divine nectar, Atma Bodha Upanishad. So I know we're a minute or two past. I'm going to keep you a little longer because I don't want to forget to conclude the Upanishad the way the Rishi concludes it. So talking about these great beings, right? Who's the disciple? The disciple is Brahman indeed, that remains altogether immersed in knowledge of the world as obliterated by the awareness of its ground, Brahman. So, and who is the sage? The sage is the knower of the essence of self-awareness, present in all as their innermost part. So you can think about Sri Ramakrishna and so forth as your very self, right? Meditate upon the Lord as your very self, seated in the shrine of your heart, the Upanishads tell you. So that's that shrine of your heart is that temple in which Sri Ramakrishna is sitting, waiting for you to come to him in meditation so you can both sit there and adore each other, adore the light that emanates from realization of the answering of the question, who's the disciple and who's that to be loved? Who's the beloved? And onward, what is the supreme bodh? That's Brahman's status. It's eternal freedom. That's why we said final beatitude, right? It comprises being, intelligence, and bliss beyond the qualities of the mind and the sense organs and the vital breaths. So that supreme abode is transcendent of objects, senses, breathing, and thinking. So we used to say all the time in SRV, God is not matter, nor is it energy, nor is it thought. Right? If you can X those three out of the equation, you might give a chance of understanding what Brahman is. And what is to be sought after? 37th question, 39th. To be sought after is the essence of pure spirit, which is untouched by space, time, and objects. So that's why you'll use the alambanas to get beyond forms, and then you'll enter into the realm of formlessness and see that beloved one face to face. Like Mahatma Gandhi said, when we see Sri Ramakrishna, we see God face to face. What is to be sought after? that pure spirit. What's to be rejected is the thought that true is the world other than one's own self, that is perceived by the false sense organs and the intellect. So reject the idea that the world is true and that the self then therefore is not. Accept the self as being reality, the Atman, and know that the world is merely a projection of the mind. Finally, the final question, who is that realized soul? It's the wandering, independent ascetic who has known for certain in the indeterminate concentration called nirvikalpa samadhi that he is Brahman. So he's had nirvikalpa samadhi. He knows then he's one with Brahman. All of the distinctions went away. He is led up to it, as we were saying about stages to liberation. He is led up to it through the experiential knowledge of the contents of major texts like, quote, there is no plurality here, unquote, quote, all this is Brahman, unquote, quote, thou art, unquote. The knowledge of the contents of the non-dual scriptures that declare that is how he's led up to the conclusion that I am Brahman. That one is liberated. That one is adorable. That one is the yogi. That one is immense. He is the Brahmana. Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamadachate ends with the peace chant like that. So that's the Niralamba Upanishad as far as 5 classes can tell it. Om Shtapakaya Chadharmasya Savadam Swami Avatarava Ishta Ramakrishna Namaha Shri Bhagavate Ramakrishna Namo Namaha. Jananim Sharadam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Pado Padme Toya Shritva Pranamami Mahor Mahor Pranamami Mahor Mahor Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Hari Om